everybody, and welcome to today's video. And in today's video, I will be doing a 2024 election prediction between current New York City mayoral candidate Andrew Yang and former President Donald Trump. So, looking at this, first off, I'm going to start by labeling all of Andrew Yang's safe states. Now, I do think I would win Colorado safe, but another thing about Yang is looking across key groups. First off, among minority voters, I think that he would be a fairly average Democrat among minority voters. I don't think he would be horrible. I don't think he would be amazing. I think he'd do similar to Clinton. Among suburban voters, he would also be very strong. I think Andrew Yang would actually be a very, very strong suburban candidate, at least for a Republican. For a Democrat. He would be a very strong suburban candidate just because his universal income, I think, would be very popular among suburban voters. And I think that overall his populism, though not typically great among suburban voters, would help him appeal. And I think he could appeal to a lot of suburban voters. However, this is where it's really good for him. I think he is actually a really good candidate for the white working class. He's a populist who has white working class appeal. His things such as universal income, I think, would be very popular among the white working class if he can convince them that he can pay for it. If he's able to do that, it will be probably a fairly successful campaign for Andrew Yang. Also, another thing, I think this is just another state that I want to discuss. He would do very well in West Virginia, at least for a Democrat. It would not be enough to make it likely, however, as it is like a 40% Republican state. In fact, if we go look at West Virginia in 2020, Donald Trump carried the state with over he won it by a little less than 40%, I believe 38.9%, which is obviously a very large margin of victory. So, I don't think you'd be able to shift it 25 points to the left, although I do think he would be strong enough to shift it to being a 20, maybe 25% GOP state, just because he's, I think, a really, really good candidate for a state like West Virginia. It would not be close to being likely, though. Now, for these likely states, so for Andrew Yang, New Mexico, Virginia, Minnesota, Maine at large. We go look at these. I'll go to New Mexico first, not Mexico. Joe Biden won it by about 10.8%. I think that Yang would do very well in Albuquerque and in urban areas. I also think he would be fairly strong among rural voters. I think he'd probably win the state overall by about 13%, something similar to that. In Minnesota, we can go look at Minnesota. I'm just going to randomly go through here. Yang, I think, would be a very strong candidate for a state like Minnesota. I've already discussed that he is strong with the white working class. I also think that he would do fairly well in Hennepin and Ramsey counties. I think he'd do very well in Minneapolis. He would probably win Lake County by 4 or 5, maybe 6%, best case scenario for him. And I think would also be a strong rural candidate. So overall, a fairly strong candidate for Minnesota. Probably win it by 9-10%. Now we go look at the state of Virginia. Joe Biden won the state by 10.1%, which is obviously a pretty large margin of victory. Yang, I think, would do, actually, this is one area where I don't think he'd do phenomenally, is among rural Virginia voters. Just because a lot of these voters are traditionally Republican, which would help him. If he was running against, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene, it would help him, probably, but not against Trump. Trump would probably still win traditional voters by fairly large margins. But I think one area I do want to go focus on is these D.C. suburbs. I think he'll do very, very well over here. I think that his pretty progressive policies, which are, I feel like fiscally, a lot of progressive policies are popular in the Rust Belt. Like Sherrod Brown won Ohio. My computer's about to die. That's where I was. Sherrod Brown won Ohio and Trump won it by like 8.1%. And I think a lot of this is because, or not a lot of it, but he did very well even with fiscally progressive policies like winning a $15 minimum wage. Same with Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. We see even in like 2014, Tom Wolf, Pennsylvania's governor, was rated the most liberal governor in the nation. So a lot of these governors do very well. A lot of these people do very well. Progressives typically do very well in the Rust Belt. However, in Virginia, I think that he would actually do very well in the suburbs. I think it would be similar to that, where a lot of these people want these strong economic policies. In uber liberal DC, it would definitely help him to be able to do well enough there. And finally, in Maine at large, I mean, like, Biden went up by like 9%. We're not going to see something that far different. I think Yang is a strong enough candidate with white voters that he'd be able to do it. Now, for our Trump likely states, Montana, Kansas, Missouri, South Carolina, Alaska, Iowa, and Indiana. So that is definitely a lot of likely states. First off, starting off with Montana, Trump won the state by about 16%, just outside of likely territory. I think that Andrew Yang would be a good enough candidate with white rural voters. They'd be able to make it like a 14% margin of victory, not an insanely large margin of victory or not an insanely narrow margin of victory, but still likely. Missouri, same thing. He's strong enough with white voters, rural white voters, to be able to do it. He'd also do well enough in Kansas City and St. Louis and in their suburbs. In Kansas, he'd probably do well in Riley County. He'd probably do well in Shawnee County. Once again, as I say in almost all of these videos, would not flip Sedgwick County, but would do well in them. Well in it. He would also do fairly well in rural Kansas. I don't necessarily. He'd probably do similar to in Missouri. In rural Kansas, and then looking at Indiana, once again, Rust Belt voters who want a lot of these things. They want these $15 minimum wages and things like universal income, regardless of if they're conservative. I think he'd be able to do well enough in Lake County, probably win, or not necessarily win, but do well in Porter and LaPorte County. I don't think he'd win Vigo County, I doubt it. But he'd probably be able to win enough in a lot of these Indiana counties and do well enough in a lot of these counties in Indiana to win. And then Alaska, Trump won by like 10%. It's shifting to the left. Yang, I don't necessarily know he would have a lot of appeal to like oil industry voters, but he would probably the shift would probably override that and probably win it by or probably lose it by like 7, 6, maybe 8%. South Carolina, I think he'd have enough rural appeal and enough minority appeal to be able to pull off a 7% loss at best for him. And then in Iowa, I actually think he'd do very well here. I think, and this is going to sound very off topic in the beginning. If you give me a second, I'll be able to explain. Barack Obama was a very, very strong candidate for a state like Iowa. I think that while we obviously won't see Obama running again, the closest things that we'll be able to see to Obama on the Democratic side are Beto O'Rourke and Andrew Yang. Yang is I would say he's a very good candidate. So looking at this, I think that he would be able to do well enough among a lot of these rural Iowa voters. I actually don't have a 2012 map pulled up. I'll go do that. We go look at Iowa. I think that Yang would be able to do well enough in this little area. I'm not sure what congressional district this is, but this area is essentially one whole congressional district. I think that Yang would be able to do well enough there among a lot of these rural voters, probably win a few of these counties, and do similarly to Obama to do very well in the state. Looking at this, I think it would probably still be likely on the verge of lean, similar to Texas. So we could see it being lean red. Or best case for Yang, I'd say it's tilt blue, maybe lean blue. I don't see it getting likely blue, though. He's not going to be able to win it he's not going to win it, probably. It'll probably still be like a likely red to lean red. I'm just going to go rank it likely red. But I think that Yang would actually do very well there, and it could easily be a lean red state. Now, for all of Yang's lean states, Nevada, Arizona, and I'll discuss a lot of these because a lot of these could easily be tilt. I forgot Trump. I think that Yang would do well enough among rural voters and well enough. And I believe it's Lincoln that's right there. Lincoln and Omaha. I get mixed up as to where they are. Okay, that's Lincoln. Or not mixed up. It's not 100% certain. He just do well enough in parts of Lincoln and rural areas to be able to make it shift at that 0.1%. Anyways, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nebraska's second one actually be likely. He'd be able to do well enough among urban voters and there's few rural voters in there to do to win it. And that is it for Yang's lean states. So that's a lot of lean states. That's 68 electoral votes worth of lean states. So let's go get started looking at Nevada first off. Bit of a disturbance there. Anyways, we'll go look at Nevada. I mean, like, Yang, I think would be able to do well enough among rural voters. He wouldn't win Carson City, but he'd probably do decent there. Probably do decent in Nye County. Probably do decent in Mineral County. Probably do decent in Leon County. Probably do decent. I mean, like, among a lot of the state. In Clark County, I think he'd probably win it by like 12, 13%. He'd do very well there. And then in Washoe County, he'd probably win by 4 or 5%. So I think he would actually be a very strong candidate. In Nevada, and I think he'd probably win it by like lean margins. Because I think that he would just be that strong candidate. Arizona, it could be Till. I mean, like, Yang, I think would do well enough in Maricopa County to be able to win it. He'd be able to do well enough in rural Arizona as well to not be like. And in a prediction I made yesterday between Kamala Harris and Nikki Haley, I had it being Tilt Blue because even though I thought that Harris would do very well in Maricopa County, I thought that her weakness in the rural areas would override it. I think that Yang would be a fairly strong candidate in rural areas, and that it wouldn't override it, and it'll probably be a 1.5 Yang state. Georgia, I think that his policies would be fairly popular in Georgia. I mean, like, in the suburbs of Atlanta, he could probably do pretty well. He'd probably do very well in Fulton, DeKalb counties. He'd probably be able to do well enough in a lot of these Atlanta suburbs. Probably do well enough in Chatham County and Liberty County. He might flip Burke County. I think that him, Biden, and Beto are probably the three candidates with the highest chances of flipping Burke County. So I think that he could do that. But I think that he would be strong enough in the Atlanta suburbs and probably do well enough with the black vote. Especially if the almost certain Stacey Abrams endorsement comes. He'll probably be able to win Georgia by upwards of 2.5%. Probably more like a 1.5% state though. And then next up in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania and Michigan. We go up over here. We go look at Pennsylvania. Biden performed very well in rural areas. I think that Yang would also be a strong candidate in rural areas. I also think that he would be a very strong candidate in Delaware County, in Montgomery County, in Bucks County. I think he would be a very strong candidate in a lot of these counties. Chester County, right there. I think he'd be a strong candidate in a lot of these areas. Maybe he wouldn't win Berks County, but he'd probably do decent there. That one's called Lancaster. I wasn't sure what its name was. I think he'd do decent there. I also think he'd do very well in Allegheny County. He'd probably win it by like 23%. And I think he'd also do well enough among rural voters to be able to win it by upwards of 2%. Just because, like I said, he's a good candidate for the white working class. Next up, Michigan. This state actually could have been in the safe column, or excuse me, the likely column. We go look at this. I think that Yang would be a very good candidate for Detroit. I think he'd probably win Wayne County by a larger margin than Biden. And I think he'd also probably do very well in these suburbs. He might win Macomb County. I doubt it, but he might win. I mean, if we go look at the shift in Macomb County, where are you, Macomb? It shifted only 3.4% to the left, so he could shift it the 8% needed. But he'd also do well enough among rural voters. I mean, like, he could win Benzie and Grand Traverse counties. He could do very well. But I think that overall he would just be a fairly strong candidate for the state. Probably win it with an upwards of 3.5 to 4%. Now for Trump's lean states: Texas, Ohio, and Florida. Florida could actually be Till. I'll be generous to Trump and I'll give it to him Till since he's gonna lose. I will be generous. Oh, also Andrew Yang, lean in New Hampshire. If we go look at it, I mean, like, he's not going to be weak enough to be able to lose it. It's just whether or not he'll be likely. It could be likely. It would not surprise me at all if it was likely. So it could be both. I'll just give it to him lean. And then, anyways, for Trump, Texas, Yang. If Beto O'Rourke is his running mate, it's going to be Tilt Red probably. Just because they're two very strong candidates. I mean, like, he'd probably do very well in Dallas County. He'd probably do very well in Harris County. He'd probably win Harris County by upwards of 18, 19, maybe even 20%, just because he's a strong enough candidate in Houston and its suburbs. He would also be, like I said, a fairly strong candidate in rural Texas. I don't know that Texas he would be as strong of a rural candidate, but he would still be, excuse me, a very strong rural very strong rural candidate. Now, you remember, a lot of these counties shifted heavily to the right against Biden. I think that Yang would be able to do better in a lot of these counties. I think that he would overall be a fairly strong candidate for the state of Texas for a Democrat, and I'll probably be able to lose it by only like 2 or 3%. Next up, Florida. Like I said, it could be Till. I'm being generous to Trump right now. Yang, I think his policies might not go over very well in Miami-Dade just because they might view him as socialist. Because of his universal income. If he's able to be able to deflect attacks of socialism and convince these voters that he's not a totalitarian, that he can pay for it, he could do very well. I think he could actually also do very well in Pinellas County and Seminole County, Duval County, maybe flip Jefferson, Monroe, and St. Lucie counties, maybe flip Escambia County. Overall, a fairly decent candidate, but not phenomenal. He might be a little bit too progressive for the state, and against Trump, he'd probably lose it by a little over 1%. And then Ohio, I think that against Nikki Haley, Yang could lose Ohio by tilt margins. I'll say that. I think Ohio is 100% in play in Yang versus Haley. I still think you probably lose it by more than tilt, but it's still a possibility. Yang versus Haley, Ohio is in play. Anyways, we look at this. He'd probably do well in Mahoning and Trumbull counties and Portage County. He'd also do very well in Cuyahoga County. He'd do well in Franklin County. He'd do well in Delaware County. He'd probably flip Delaware County. Do well in Hamilton County. He'd probably win Montgomery County by upwards of 4 or 5%. Maybe win Wood County. I don't know, but he would be a fairly strong candidate for a state like Ohio, and he would do very, very well in rural Ohio. At least for a Democrat against Trump. Trump's a very strong rural candidate as well. I think that they're both two strong rural candidates, and that Yang would lose it by 4% against a stronger rural candidate than Trump, or a weaker rural candidate than Trump. He would win it. I'll say that he would win it. Also, Trump would win, or not win it, but he would do well. He would lose it by worst case scenario for him 4%. Anyways, looking at Maine, 2nd Congressional District. I believe the border goes like that. I think that this county's in Maine 2nd. I think that's how the border goes. I may be wrong. Because I think that the border for this one is by Congressional District. This one might be in the, or by county, which I actually find very interesting and helpful. It made one of my election nights easier. Anyways, looking at this, I think that looking through this, he would be able to perform, Yang that is, would be able to perform well enough among rural white voters to be able to make it lean. Probably similar margins to Ohio, though. Now, for Yang's tilt states, and it's the only 2 states remaining, Wisconsin and North Carolina. North Carolina could go either way, I'll say that. Yang, I think, would not be able to do well enough among a lot of those voters in western Wisconsin. However, he would be able to do well enough in Milwaukee, and he'd do decent enough among these voters. Not phenomenal, but he'd do decent enough to be able to make it a tilt state. He'd probably do slightly overperform Biden. And in North Carolina, this was a really hard call. It'll be very, very close, I'll say that. But looking at this, he's gonna probably win Mecklenburg County by very large margins. He's gonna do very well in rural North Carolina. I think he'll be a strong candidate for rural North Carolina. He'd also be a strong candidate for North Carolina suburbs, which are still very, very red. I've discussed previously the type of shift that I would need for North Carolina suburbs to flip. I think I average out Clinton and Biden's numbers there, he would be able to do similarly to Biden in rural North Carolina. He'd be able to do well in the suburbs well enough so that he can flip the state. It would be very, very close. Trump could easily win it. If I had to give Yang a favorability rating in the state, I would say it's like a 51-49 for Yang. It will be incredibly close, and it's incredibly hard to call. I just think that Yang would very, very narrowly pick it up. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. Don't forget to save for my next video, and I will don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye.